And so here I am again with another video in very bad lighting, but it's 11:40, so I figured I'd do one more video because burning the late night oil. I don't really need to be up early, so I can stay up a little bit later, and I wanted to just do a very simpler talk, not necessarily a rant, although I'll still put it as a rant, but this is more of an overarching concept, and that is in games to understand your win condition. Now, what do I mean by that? It's more than... Alright, back up. When is the game 50% completed? That is the first question I would ask a person. And it's before the game even begins. It's when you've decided your deck. It's when you've built your team. It's when you've chosen your moves. It's when you've chosen your loadout. It's when you've decided what perks to take. Whatever. It's in all the preparation. That's probably about 50% to maybe even 75% depending on the game. That's 70% of the battle. And a lot of the battle is how well you've built your deck to deal with your opponents and how well they built their deck to deal with yours. And that's a huge part that a lot of people say, I'm better, but you luck hacked. Well, luck sacking, or luck hacking, or whatever the term is now, is not as much luck, but more manipulating the odds. Exceptions may apply to this rule, but a lot of times when someone gets a lucky top deck, yeah, it's annoying, but I will at least acknowledge that this person built their deck at least to a half decent level to where they could survive long enough to top deck what they needed. That's an important part of the game, building your deck and being able to utilize your resources well to survive so you could potentially get more resources that can close out the game. And a lot of people don't understand that. The one exception to this rule would probably be Light Sworns because they don't really care about their resources, but I hate Light Sworns, so anyone who enjoys Light Sworns, I apologize. I hate that archetype. I think the cards themselves are really cool. I love their card design, and I like the idea of them, but they're dumb, and I hate them. Their mechanics and interaction are retarded, and the fact that they can run Denko Sekka just puts them on top of my shit list. So I apologize if there are any Lightsworn lovers out there. But utilizing your win conditions. Now, when you're building your deck, or building a team, or choosing a loadout, or whatever, most people will pick a card, or a combo, or a Pokemon, or whatever, to base their entire setup around. And that's fine. And you should definitely be aiming to utilize or pull out that combination or that Pokemon, or pull it out in an optimal situation and use it. But a lot of people develop tunnel vision. They think, I need to do this combination of plays. If I don't do it, then I'm not playing my deck right. And that's not entirely true. And when I say understand your win con, that means that you understand how to win without your win con, if that makes sense. Let's take, I don't know, Gravekeepers. Okay, Gravekeeper anti-meta. Alright, let's look at some very standard win cons. They have Necro Valley, which can shut down a lot of cards. The Priestess Girl, that is basically the field protection. I believe she also negates other stuff, but I forget. I don't know Gravekeepers as well as I used to anymore. There's a lot of new ones, though. Heretic can sometimes be considered a win con just because he just says, I'm immune to everything. Key Beetle is a beefy monster that protects Necro Valley. Skill Drain, Royal Tribute. Okay, but out of all of those, most of the time, people will usually pick one of those cards to sort of revolve their play around. And that's fine, but you have to remember that you have these other cards to work with. And more important than that, you have to understand that even though you might have lost your primary or even your secondary win con, your deck, if you've done it right, shouldn't be done just yet. Even if you have blown up all 3 of my Necro Valleys, even if you have blown up majority of my back row, Gravekeepers can still play a fairly decent grind game. We could just sort of cycle resources out with Stel. We could keep searching out stuff with Recruiter, and blow up stuff with Descendant using Recruiter as fodder. So we have a very much of still have board control, and we're still cycling our cards back into our deck while you're running out of resources. I've won plenty of games by just repeatedly blowing up stuff and cycling it back in, and just basically saying, I have more resources and I can get back my resources. And while a lot of players will understand that they can do that, they don't understand that that can be a potential win condition. So another example of this would probably be the Gustos, another one of my favorite archetypes. Not necessarily the most competitive one right now. I believe Necra is still shit on Gustos about 7 ways to Sundays thanks to Trishula. I like having a hand, I like having a field, I like having a graveyard, and Trishula fucks all 3 up, so what can I do? But Gusto's primary win condition is Srees and pulling out Srees. To do that, you have Pilica, you have Esper Girl even, I think you can use if you use Calm. Some people have done that. I don't like that. You can use Serene Psychic, which to pull out Pilica even faster, searching out stuff, Gusto, Loop, etc. And the Gusto Loop is probably the predominant factor of the grind game, but a lot of people don't realize that Gustos actually have a fair amount of destructive stuff in the form of, Contact with Gusto, Quillpen of Guldo. We can actually still play that same grind game, and it's integrated into our deck set. And at the same time, we still have this 1 win condition in Srees, or I personally run Miracle Synchro Fusion for an alternate win condition in the form of Ultimate Axion Kicker, and that thing will just basically win you so many games if they don't answer it within 2 turns. But again, this is more to not necessarily berate newer players, but don't focus so hard on 1 card or 1 combo. Understand the entire concept of your deck. For Gustos, it is basically you are saying, I will always have a field presence. Okay, so that is a win condition. That is your way of playing the deck. That is how you should be playing the deck. That is what your entire deck revolves around. And if you can utilize that strength, it becomes a win condition. And yes, you can you can build a deck around 1 card. I don't like that idea. It feels very restricting in a way. And while Gustos do predominantly rely on Srees, I can still pull out other stuff. And, well, it's a bit of a complicated thing to put into words, but it just feels like people are relying way too heavily on these set combos and just know if I play these cards in this order, I can win, when in fact they might have had the win a turn or 2 before if they had just understood a different methodology of the deck, if that makes sense. It's, again, not an easy thing to explain. It's more of a keep things in mind and take your time type of thing. If you take your time and slow down, you'll start to see different ways to use your cards. Be it using Call of the Haunted to pull back your Falcon, or Mist Valley Falcon to bounce back the Falcon, or bounce back Call of the Haunted, or do something creative with Call of the Haunted, or whatever have you. But just understand that your cards, while they should be used in a certain way, that isn't the important thing to understand when you're playing a deck. You have to understand the overarching concept of your deck before you could truly start to really call yourself a good player of the deck. I would never call myself a good player because I bounce between decks, so I don't really have time to really learn all the tricky stuff about them. The exception being anti-meta, because anti-meta is basically played nearly the same way no matter how you put it, and I love it so much. But, yeah, it's understanding how you don't have just one win condition. A lot of players say, well, there goes my win condition, I'm going to forfeit, and I'll just sort of go, thanks for the win, but I'm pretty sure you could have still played. Okay, if you really want to quit, I will let you. I'll take the easy win, but it's very disheartening to just sort of see people, you interrupt their combo chain once, and it's like not even turn 2, and you've interrupted them once, and it's not even that big of a play. Somebody forfeited because I bottomless their freaking Banisher, and I already had Banisher out. So I was really, really confused as to, I mean, yeah, I have a beater and you don't, but come on, man. Like, I don't need my graveyard. Why did you just forfeit? Banisher was affecting both of us. But, Pokemon, this applies particularly to Pokemon, this whole concept of understanding your win condition. Now, in Pokemon, I just said I don't like building around one card. In Pokemon, it's a bit different. You can build around one or two Pokemon. But, again, I tend to have a favorance towards Lucario, for instance. A very it's a very strong attacker, basically. It's not exactly the fastest thing, but it has a lot of priority, and it can get around a lot of its problems if you do it right. I have a huge favorance towards him, and I love him so much. But my original black and white team had a Landorus T, a bulky Jellicent, a Ferrothorn, a Heatran, and a Latias, and Lucario himself. So my entire goal of this team was to basically create an opportunity for Lucario to come in and just pick off and clean up the rest of the team, because that's what he does best. That is what that Pokemon is designed to do. It comes in on something that can't touch it or doesn't want to stay in on it, sets up, and then proceeds to wreck everything with Bullet Punch and Extreme Speed, or Close Combat, depending on the speed. It's a really effective strategy if it can get to work. But a lot of the games, I just sort of pulled in Lucario once, killed one Pokemon, switched out, and I never used him again, and I proceeded to win anyway. And this is sort of where I started to realize that my game plan wasn't entirely around Lucario. I mean, Landorus, Jellicent, Latias, all the other 5 Pokemon are all ridiculously bulky while holding a substantial amount of threat, really. Jellicent is just a wall that never died back in 5th Gen and had burns forever with Scald and Will-O-Wisp. At one point I ran Shadow Ball too, but then I switched that out for Taunt just to mess with pink blobs known as Blissey. Ferrothorn was doing a ridiculous amount of damage with Power Whip and Leech Seed. Landorus is going to hit like a truck with base 145 attack, and Latias, I just said, fuck it, I'm going to be as annoying as possible with this thing, and gave it Calm Mind, Substitute, and Roost. And Dragon Pulse, I proceeded to just use that as a setup sweeper. And a lot of the times, towards the later end of my career, I would be wearing down the opponent so effectively with the rest of the team that I could just literally win with 5 Pokemon and not even use Lucario. And while Lucario was still my primary goal, and I always kept an eye out for an opportunity to switch in Lucario and just go ham, I always had this I'm going to get small advantages game. And I could switch in and out very aggressively with that team. I had a ridiculous number of synergies in my typings, and I could just play mind games forever, and I would mess with people for days on it. I'd leave Ferrothorn in on a Charizard, and they wouldn't know what to do, because if they went for Fire Blast, well, not Fire Blast, I guess it would be Flamethrower back then. Flamethrower, well, hi, I have a Heatran. If they went for Earthquake, okay, lol, Ferrothorn doesn't care. If they went for a Fighting Route to try to find a middle ground, okay, Jellicent's immune to you, and I resist fire, so you don't know what I'm doing. it was great. And I could also go out to Latias, because I was just fighting and fire. If you go for a flying move, well, you just went for a flying move, and I know you're not really that great of a trainer if you're using a flying move on a Charizard. You should probably be using a ground move, and you should probably be using Roost to counteract Solar Power, and you should really be using Charizard in the Sun, because that was the only time back then, that was the only way to use Charizard because of Solar Power, and that chips away your health, so you should be using Roost. And yeah, that was very long-winded, but it just started to show that as I played with that team more, I started to understand my overarching goal, and that was wear down the opponent and then come in for a kill. It wasn't, I'm going to hammer you forever and ever like a lot of teams are now just because of Mega Evolutions. More on that later. But it was a very controlled aggression deck. I would maybe not kill off your Pokemon quickly, but I would wear them down to the point where if you switch them in, they're gonna die, or they're not gonna like getting burned. I would just repeatedly apply pressure and damage until eventually something gives and your entire team falls apart. Of course, the reverse was also true, to a degree with my team. If I lost Lucario, I lost basically my only physical threat until I got, except for Landorus. Ferrothorn kind of counted. But, it was interesting just sort of to see how many people would panic the moment I got rid of one of their Pokemon. And yes, I can understand if I blow up your only special defense wall and my Latias has 6 Calm Minds under her belt. Yeah, I can understand you forfeited because not you let my Latias get up to 6 Calm Minds and you didn't have Roar or Taunt or anything to deal with it. You deserve it. But a lot of people just don't understand basically how to play or how to plan. Planning is very important. So if you're going to take away 2 things from this video, that is, battles are won before they're even begun, and look for an unexpected solution. Those would be probably the 2 phrases to keep in your head when you're doing any type of strategy or turn-based game. Hell, you could maybe even consider that into Call of Duty or whatever, but I'm not entirely sure. I'm not really good with shooters, so I can't say that for certain. But I could definitely see preparing could probably play a big impact. But I don't know. Maybe I'm just rambling. Maybe I'm tired. In fact, I am tired. But take away those 2 things. Battles are won before they're even begun, and look for unexpected solutions. And understand that things aren't always used the way they should be if you're going to win. That's complicated in theory, but once you start thinking a bit slower, I guess is the best way to put it, you'll start to see different interactions that you can pull off. Be it in Pokemon, be it in Yu-Gi-Oh!, be it in whatever type of game you want to play. Anyway, guys, again, thank you all so much for watching this video. It's a bit long-winded, and I definitely rambled on. These are not rehearsed, as I'm sure you can tell. These are all off the cuff, because I know there are a lot of YouTubers that prepare a lot of statements, and I kind of want to be different from that. And that means that my videos might be not as great, but I think that it makes it a bit more memorable in a way. Like, if I were to, you will remember things better if I stumble around them. You will remember that I fucked up a sentence, and you will remember this video, and you will remember it. At least, that's the theory. Maybe I'll start doing some more prepared stuff. But for these rants, I just sort of want to give it to you raw, basically. That could have been phrased better. Anyway, I'm the Gamer Ninja, and I hope you all have a great night, and I am out of here.